Massive change on two issues that I've cared about my whole life, which is racial and sexual equality. And I still feel like that was an important moment, and we're still living with it. But it's a harder time now, and we're in all this together. So there's probably a few minutes for thoughts and questions. I'm really happy to have your opinions. Yes?
Yes, would you comment on the current governor's race in Minnesota? To me, Margaret was by far the superior candidate. She played by the rules.
Right.
She got the nomination, and then she lost this primary vote. And was there sexism involved in that? To me, it seems like there was.
Well, I'm now not basing anything I say on any research whatsoever, but just on my opinions as a citizen. I feel very much the way you did. I thought Margaret was the strongest candidate. And I suspect that that's a piece of the picture. Whether it's the amount of money that could be spent in the campaign, that's another piece of the picture. Whether it's the throw the bums out attitude of anybody who's already a major figure, you know, that we're in a time where that's happening a lot. But I suspect so, and to tack back to what makes Sarah Palin and several other major figures in Republican circles, Michelle Bachmann, who's the woman in South Carolina who's on the ballot for governor?
Oh, yeah.
Kelly, I can't remember. Anyway, but anyway, they are all extremely attractive women. Margaret is really, well, she looks like us. You know, she looks like a regular person. And so what it seems to be helpful to women to have that star quality of that comes with being extremely attractive. So, you know, and I mean, that's where sexism comes in, right there, boom. Because male candidates look like everything. You know, from some very handsome ones to some extremely not. And they're all over the place, and that doesn't seem to make much difference. Yes?
Do you think that once women got the vote, I mean, I've heard stories of my mother telling me that my grandmother said that she knew people whose husbands still refused to let them vote.
Absolutely.
Even after women got the vote.
Absolutely.
So how does the percentage of when women actually started voting more play into the nominations and people running? That's
a great question. Because it is true, in the 20s and 30s, women voted in much less compared to men in proportion. And some of them had husbands who wouldn't let them vote, and some of them were so deeply socialized to think that they shouldn't, that they just would say, I wouldn't know who to vote for. And then a whole lot of them, initially, they and their husbands voted the same way. And it's really not until we're into the 80s that you start getting what we now call the gender gap. By then, women are voting in the same numbers as men, proportionately, and I would say now it may even be higher. And we begin to see, I think Bella Abzug wrote her book on the gender gap in 1984. That's when we first start thinking there might be, and there was some argument about, is this really true? Do women vote differently than men? The suffragists thought women would vote very differently than men. They thought women should be citizens because women are the ones who care about children and education and health and safety. And so if you make women full citizens, we will have all these reforms that women will insist on as citizens. And there was this whole agenda that came out of the reform movements in and around the suffrage movement. And it was a little disheartening for them to realize that women kind of voted like the men in their families voted for a long time. But come the 80s, here we are way down the road, it does seem that women and men sometimes have somewhat different agendas. that their attention is caught by different issues. And that gap, it certainly was pretty big in 2008. Whether this is a persistent long-term thing, I have no idea. But I think you're right. There's no question that the full participation of women as voters, to start with, had to be there before a female candidate would be viable. And then you needed a pipeline of women serving in many different levels of elective office and being fully qualified and ready to be on that stage. And then the fact that there is some tendency of women to vote differently than men has yet another piece of that story. Yes?
Would you, if she runs, would you, and I use the term consideration, would you consider voting for Sarah Palin in 2012 if she runs?
Absolutely not. No, I mean, I vote for people because of what they stand for and what I believe they can accomplish. And I disagree with Sarah Palin on many, many, many issues. So, and I think we've demonstrated now that women don't, there's no knee-jerk thing that happens when women say, oh, there's a woman on the ballot, therefore I must vote for her. We're just
Only when you
citizens
see
like-
my name.
Certain women. Right. Yes.
Speaking of funny, I'm a retired Army officer who was privileged to serve on Hillary Clinton's military task force during the campaign and travel with her when we went down to North Carolina.
Yeah.
The thing that was astounding about that time is while I was a woman officer working with her, there were 45 very senior male officers of the armed forces, to include 2 chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who were very enthusiastically supporting her in her candidacy. The woman cut across political and personal boundaries because of her own attributes to serve. And I will always feel, I voted for Obama because she told us when she conceded that we had to back him. And there was no question I would anyway. But I will always think that she would have been the better president.
To what extent do you think that the Sarah Palin thing is a symptom of an urban-rural divide? That here's this woman from a small town who hunts moose and likes that community.
Well, yeah, I mean, and as you know, when I gave a lecture on this topic in at the University of Minnesota, and they put it on the midday program on public radio, I got a long letter from a woman who said, she said, I enjoyed your lecture, I learned a lot from it, but you don't get it about Sarah Palin. And she went on to do a very interesting analysis. She said there's 2 classes of people in this country, city people and country people. And what she was arguing was that women in the country, I think she did mean rural, but I would say small towns too, are used to doing heavy labor, are used to, you know, they live rougher lives, and that Sarah Palin represented them to her. She said, we are, y'all don't, basically in Southern terms, y'all don't understand us. You don't get us.
And I forgot the Mama Grizzly ad.
Yeah, right, right. And you know, I think that's a way that Sarah Palin is taking the female maternal imagery and turning it into something that's both powerful and not challenging to boundaries between men and women. You don't have to worry about it. We're almost out. Is there, I just saw somebody. Yeah, one more question, I think. Yes?
What about, I think you're right, that's the way a lot of women who are for Sarah Palin view her.
Yeah.
What about the whole fear aspect? Because I think that men, in some respects, were afraid of Hillary because of the
Yes.
power that she did have. She does have power.
Yes, she does.
Sarah had no power at the time.
Yeah.
So I think while they were playing for women in that aspect, they were also playing against men who were afraid of a woman in power.
Maybe so. I mean, that's what I pondered, because she wanted a position of considerable power, and she still does. And on some levels, she's quite powerful now. You know, I mean, her endorsement has made the difference in several races. But what you're suggesting is that Hillary was perceived as being very powerful already. And that made her scary. And Sarah Palin was outside of power, attacking power.
Yeah.
And that position makes it, you know, the fact that she's a woman isn't so scary. So that may be true. And so if
Ironic.
your analysis is right, then we'll see what happens when she runs for president. Thank you very much.